Welcome to Crossing the Tape. Today's interesting case is about the Cleveland torso murderer.
Oh, the Butcher of Kingsbury Run.
Yes. As always, I'm Hillary.
I'm Brendan.
Welcome to the show. Sign the crime scene log and join us.
We begin in 1934, September to be exact, Ohio, in the land of Cleve.
Oh,
Cleveland.
I got it.
Thank you. A woman's torso cut off at the thighs, which I guess if you're going to be cut off somewhere, that's as good as anywhere.
I don't think there's a preferable spot.
We'll see. We'll get there.
Okay.
Because we've got a few different options here.
So that's option number one.
Cut off at the thighs, washed up on the shores of Lake Erie.
How fitting. Erie.
Lake Spooky. Was never identified, and she'd been in the water for several months. Her skin was discolored, reddish, likely due to a chemical applied to her body before being dumped.
Wasn't it very leather-like?
Very leathery indeed. And though shocking and highly puzzling, this case just appeared to be a plain old Depression-era murder, and not indicative of anything greater. But a couple years later, this would be officially identified as victim number 0, the lady in the lake.
Ah, yes. I read about that one.
Victim 0 because it wasn't initially tied to the torso killer's murders, but how often do you find a torso?
Right.
Just. I'm not sure why it wasn't looked at. It had to be added in later, which is why this isn't victim 1. This is 0.
Right. Especially when they don't know who the murderer is.
Right. You start seeing torsos pop up in the same area. You start to wonder if it's maybe the same guy.
Right.
Or person. There could be lady serial killers. Nanny Doss.
Mm-hmm.
1 year later, September of 35, 2 boys found the naked, castrated, headless bodies of 2 men in Cleveland's Kingsbury Run, specifically on Jackass Hill. How fun. I mean, not the bodies, but Jackass Hill. One male, approximately 40 years old, was not identified, just like the lady in the lake. But the other was ID'd as Edward Andrassy. And Andrassy was known to frequent the Kingsbury Run area, which was essentially a Hooverville, those Depression-era shantytown homeless encampments, rife with prostitution and vagabonds and other ne'er-do-wells.
Right.
But a lot of just working poor people who didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and the best they could do was set up a little shanty under a bridge. January of 1963, the body of Florence Palillo was identified, or located, stuffed into a pair of baskets. Of course, also chopped up and so on. Not at the thighs.
So this is option number 2.
Preferable. Of course, decapitated as well, which was the cause of death. Yes, the cause of death was decapitation, but the killer, according to the coroner, waited for rigor mortis to set in after that before further dismembering. She was identified by her fingerprints, which is fun.
Yes.
You love fingerprints.
I love fingerprints. They're the best.
Not from a dismembered hand, though, preferably.
No, I've only dealt with that once. Wasn't too fun.
And that was enough.
Yeah.
The trend would continue through fall of 1936, with an additional 3 victims being discovered between the start of the year and fall. All 3 were male, all 3 decapitated. The victims were often drained of their blood and chemically preserved, again, like leather.
Kind of like a taxidermy kind of thing.
Right. And often castrated. And something that'll be important later. The cuts were always precise, careful, maybe surgical. in nature. Generally, the cause of death was the decapitation, and the heads were removed with one clean, swift whoosh.
That's an interesting method of killing, though. I mean, there's
Just straight decapitation.
just get it over with.
Not
And
shooting,
No.
poisoning, and then dismembering later.
yeah, that's odd.
Well, and that would mean you would have to overpower the victim, or maybe sedate them.
That's possible. That would be more likely.
And
One swoop and that's it. So
Yeah.
you have to do it right.
right, the strength that it would take, even with the proper tools, to decapitate someone like that, plus being able to carry them up the hills of carry them up Jackass Hill. I'm pretty sure my dad told me to go up Jackass Hill once, but I don't know what he meant.
Pretty sure it wasn't that.
The strength that it would take to cleanly dismember someone like that, decapitate, and heave their body even in separate baskets or different wrappings like we'll see later, led authorities to believe this was more than likely a male, possibly medical background, or just an absolute lunatic.
Well, that goes without
Or
saying. Both.
Who would do something like this? A sane person?
No.
Media attention was off the charts thanks to the lack of suspect information other than, probably a dude. And, of course, the possibility that anyone in Kingsbury Run or the surrounding areas could be next.
Right.
The
Scary.
victims, usually not identified, and the ones that were, didn't seem to have a connection. But have you heard of Elliot Ness?
Oh, yes.
Elliot, don't call me Loch Ness. Legendary Prohibition-era lawman, leader of the Untouchables, we've all seen the movie, and was appointed safety director for Cleveland, which put him in charge of police and fire for the whole city. So he's the fire police chief, or the police fire chief.
Right.
Not a job I envy.
No.
That seems like a big city and way too much to have on one person's plate.
Right.
The high-profile Torso murders demanded Ness's direct involvement because, of course, look, man, you're in charge of all this. He just started the job in 1935, and the bodies are immediately turning up. I'm not saying there was correlation, but it becomes his responsibility right away, and the mayor's leaning on him to get it solved and get this stopped.
It's sure a test of his abilities.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. He's dealt with Al Capone.
Right.
Now he's dealing with a real dangerous person.
Not tax evasion.
Yeah, this is the real deal. Not bootlegging.
Right.
D-legging. Ness assigned detectives to pose as hobos. What a fun assignment. To mosey around Kingsbury Run, keeping their ear to the ground, interviewing other vagrants, and trying to uncover any leads. Yeah, maybe somebody's talking, or they could overhear that somebody knows someone who went missing or is responsible. Or, hey, my friend likes to cut people into pieces and remove their heads and castrate them and chemically preserve them. But they never heard anything like that,
Right.
unfortunately. The hobo cops, as I call them, conducted about 1,500 interviews with the people of Kingsbury Run, and between them and the rest of the department, the uniformed detectives, over 5,000 people were questioned during the investigation, and still there were no major breaks in the case.
Wow.
That is a lot of questioning,
Yeah.
especially to turn up, I don't know.
And back then, you have to think of the transcripts for that.
Ugh.
Because they didn't have body cameras.
Some
they didn't have
Poor
voice recorders.
secretary on a typewriter.
They had to write it down on their notepads and then have it transcribed for their actual report.
Woof. So that also means if they did that for every single one, formally, they're somewhere in
Right.
the records. There's like
That's probably most
tens
of the
of
case
thousands
file.
of pages.
That's
Yeah.
probably the case file. The murder book is probably just the transcripts.
You'd probably get a little sloppy towards the end with that much.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Talk to this guy. He didn't say nothing.
Right.
Next. Only 4,099 to go. Still no breaks in the case from all that questioning. And that leads us to victim number 7. Though the increased police activity and presence in Kingsbury Run probably had the locals shaken up, it wasn't enough to dissuade the killer. In February of 37, bodies were still turning up. In June of that year... No.
On the same hill?
Not
or somewhere
Jackass.
different?
Well, it's all Jackass Hill when you think about it. Every town has a Jackass Hill. February of 37, a 3-month dead body washed up on East 30th Street. Decapitated, unidentified, and female is really all we know.
By then, yeah. Surprised they know that much.
In June, a skull was found under a bridge next to a burlap sack containing the rest of the decedent's skeleton. That one was possibly identified as, I believe her first name was Rose.
I think so.
Possibly identified by dental records, though the coroner said that it wasn't for certain. So that's still...
It was iffy, but that was closer than they got with most of them.
Right. Yeah, they had the first 2, and then no luck, and then this one a maybe. Victim number 9, July of that same year. What was it?
Yeah, it was Rose Wallace.
Rose Wallace. That's the one. Still either Rose Wallace or Jane Doe, number 3 at that point. July of the same year, 73, a headless male corpse in pieces was recovered from the, pronounce this correctly, Cuyahoga River. I'm not from Cleveland, I don't know.
Don't ask me.
In addition to decapitation, the corpse also had its heart ripped out.
Interesting.
And gross.
Yeah, well, gross, but that's interesting as far as MO.
Yeah. Right, to this point, there's been castration and decapitation. Now the killer's getting maybe a little too sickening for my liking. That's a bit much. That's where I draw the line.
That's the line?
Yeah. No, leave the heart alone. April of 1938, another body was found in the same river. It was pulled from the river, separated into a couple different burlap bags. This one female, again, unidentified. The arms of that body were never recovered. The rest was found in the different bags, but no arms.
Huh.
This one, though, testing showed that there were drugs in their system prior to the death.
That would explain a lot.
Yeah, possibly to paralyze, sedate the victim. But again, the arms were never found, so that could have indicated more, like if they were a
forethought,
recreational drug user and had,
True.
regular injection sites on the arm.
Well, then I'm thinking the arm was forethought because there's no fingerprints then.
Right. Yeah, that helped prevent identification. And of course, if the drugs were administered there, it could have been more to throw the police off the scent. August of 1938, 2 more bodies were found in a garbage dump, which could be seen, get this, from Elliot Ness's office window. Yeah, possibly to taunt the lawman.
A little bit of a tease.
Yeah. Oh, bastards. Both bodies dismembered, wrapped in butcher paper. One of them female, I believe the other male. But the female was wrapped in a men's suit jacket, a blazer, as well as, well, the head was at least, being wrapped in butcher paper. And So we've got 12 victims by that point.
That was going to be my next question. What number are we on now?
We're at 12. Very similar throughout. Always dumped in strange places, and it seems like every time someone just stumbles upon them.
Right.
Like the ones in the river, someone saw something floating and investigated it, and it turns out that was part of a body, which launched a search for the remains, which were usually very close by. The ones in the garbage dump, the workers were, I guess, sifting through and found the woman, called police, who came and started searching for the rest of her body, and stumbled upon the second body.
Right. But I still feel like that one was left there intentionally.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, if it can be seen from Elliot Ness's window,
then
that's
that was
kind of hey, I'm right under your nose, and you still can't catch me. And they still didn't have anything, really.
Right.
They were bringing people in regularly for questioning, holding them for the murders, and then realizing, we don't have anything, and having to drop it and release them.
Now, nowadays, that wouldn't be the case, because there'd be some kind of surveillance footage from somewhere, especially outside of a law enforcement building. There would be some kind of camera for detection. So, I mean, during that time,
you'd at least see a vehicle.
Right, you'd see something. You'd have a little bit more just because of all of the technology and tracking ability these days. But of course, back then, that wasn't available.
Now, something that I never, in the research that I did, I didn't see it come up. I don't think they ever considered that there would have been more than one killer.
They did later on. But that wasn't until 1997.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 1997, they decided that there was probably more than one.
Or at least someone
some
working in
conjunction.
Right.
Yeah. But that wasn't
much later.
Yeah. 1997 was when they decided that.
Wow. Yeah, because that seems like, I mean, if you've got one person luring these people in or kidnapping somehow and going totally unnoticed, that's going to be difficult enough. And then dismembering them alone, we know the cuts were precise and careful. So if there were two guys just hacking at a person with a couple of hatchets, you wouldn't have that.
No.
But then disposing of the bodies, I don't know,
to me,
it could have been one person doing a whole lot of work, or it could have been a couple.
To me, it seems like maybe there was one person actually committing the murders because of the clean cuts. And if they were the same, I didn't see anything about that either. If they were the same or used the same kind of knife.
They were always clean. I think regardless of the implement, there was never like someone sawed through with a bread knife.
No, but that's what I mean. Because that was so consistent. To me, it seems like
whoever was doing the
there
chopping.
was one murderer.
Yeah.
But I would not doubt by any means that there was somebody assisting. So, and at that point, you still have to say that there's two, just because of involvement.
Yeah. So if there's a second person involved and they both kept the secret, it also makes you wonder what the motive could have been. I mean, it's the Depression. Nobody really has anything, and they're taking people from a shanty town.
They were bored.
Yeah.
Could have been somebody who had been a lot more busy at one time and got severely bored. I mean, that's a very demented way to take care of boredom.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I've never quite gone down that path.
Let's hope you never do.
Video games. I play video games when I'm bored. But it does raise the question of who and for what reason.
Right.
Because, all right, let's say you kill all 12 of these people and you dismember them and hide the bodies around and the cops have no idea.
I think it's that.
What did you gain?
You gained.
It's not like they had, well, this guy had a nice watch, so we took that. Nobody has anything.
I think that's exactly it.
These are the bums.
I think it's that they got away with so many murders without right under the police's nose without ever being caught. And for some people, that's the entire idea.
It's just seeing how much they can do.
Well, and then you have to look at the castration.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a confidence booster that they did it because they were getting away with it, so they kept doing it because they may have had a low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And a confidence booster, they may have felt like they were inadequate based on castrating all the men.
Mm-hmm.
And decapitating is another form of control and
Right.
dominance.
Jealousy and loneliness and wanting to feel some form of power.
Right. So I
they're
mean,
taking away other men's manliness, so to speak.
right. And I'm no expert, but it's speculative. But it would make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Seems like you would. If it's the Depression, wouldn't you want to murder a millionaire and take all their money?
There were no millionaires. What are you talking about?
Well, Cleveland had millionaires row. It was a booming town. Or the guy that isn't giving you any work because he doesn't have the money to pay any employees.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
the poor working class who are struggling just like everyone else.
Well, but that was easy.
That's true. Well,
And they wouldn't.
so many were unidentified.
Exactly. They didn't know it. They would not be missed. I hate to say it that way, but that's what it would be.
Well, and that's the same reason a lot of modern serial killers will target prostitutes.
Or
There's a far lower likelihood that anyone's going to come looking for them or report them missing because a lot of times they're estranged from family. They don't have any contact with anyone else.
So no one's going to be looking.
Right. Yeah, who's going to come searching for John Doe number 5?
Right.
Who was just some guy past sleeping under a bridge.
Right.
Well, speaking of sleeping under a bridge, if you can't stop the butcher from victimizing the residents of Kingsbury Run, kind of a can't beat 'em, join 'em sort of thing.
I guess, but I don't think that was his thinking. I think his thinking was to get rid of the temptation, but it was done in a very poor fashion.
This is a real kill the hostage situation.
This never would happen nowadays.
Yeah. Well, if you kill the hostages, then the hostage taker doesn't have any more leverage. Then you can get them. Is kind of the way.
That's the mindset here, which is
if
wrong.
If they're killing the homeless, let's get rid of the homeless.
Yeah. So
we can't find who's doing it, so let's just take away their victim pool.
So we're not saying that this is the right way to go about it. This is the complete opposite of right.
Yeah, but I think the pressure was starting to get to Ness. It was August 16th of 38 that the 2 bodies were found in the garbage dump that you could see from his window. Mm-hmm. August 18th, him and a whole load of the Cleveland police force and fire department came marching through Kingsbury Run. They snatched up a whole bunch of dudes for questioning. They went area by area, searching different shacks and shanties, looking for any clues. Maybe there's bloody implements or whoever is doing this lives
They got
within there.
away with that too because of his position.
Yes.
And that he was calling them fire inspections.
Which is bananas. So
right.
no search warrant needed.
No search warrant, just it's a fire inspection, so we have to come inside your dwelling.
Right. I, as the fire chief, am going to perform an inspection, and I'm bringing these cops with me just for security.
Just in case.
Yeah, just in case, because there's a bunch of bums around, and one of them might be the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. So they marched through, arrested a whole bunch of people on suspicion. Probably anyone that said, hey, you can't do that.
Or had a knife.
Yeah. Searched many shacks, found no clues, and decided to get rid of Kingsbury Run altogether.
Because that's the problem.
Yeah.
Not the murder. It's
that they
the
can't
place.
find. It's the
It's
victims.
the place.
It's the access to
was
the
his
victims.
thinking.
So they gathered everything up, including what little belongings all these poor people had, and set fire to them, and literally extinguished Kingsbury Run.
Mm-hmm. So all those little shacks were no more.
Yeah.
All those poor people didn't have anywhere else to go now.
All the homeless people are now even further displaced.
Right.
But I guess he thought that would be the end of it. And technically speaking, there were only 12 victims. So after they did that, there weren't any other confirmed victims
Right.
of the butcher. But
That's still not the way to go about it.
And they still didn't have any clues. They were no closer to solving. It's like, if people keep robbing banks, burn all the money. Then they can't take anything. That'll stop
That'll
it.
Teach them.
Yeah, that'll stop it, but that doesn't solve anything.
No.
But eventually there were some interesting suspects, and I think you've got a good bit of information there.
Yes. So in my research, I found that there were about 3 viable suspects. The first one was Frank Dolezal, and he lived with that one ID'd victim, Polillo, for a while. He was arrested for her murder, but he died under suspicious circumstances in custody. And I never really saw what it was. Did you see exactly? Because I never saw how he died.
According to the coroner, he suffered 6 broken ribs while in
jail
police custody. So they more than likely beat the absolute hell out of this guy. And he, at 5'8" tall, hung himself to death from a hook that was 5'7" off the ground. Not easy to do.
No.
But if someone
stranger things have happened,
and hangs you from a hook, I guess it would look that way.
Right.
So it's a widely held belief that law enforcement believed this was the guy.
And
which was he... I don't think there was anything about his race there.
I don't believe so. He's the only one I didn't see his race.
He allegedly confessed to some of them.
Yeah, but
he was also probably mentally incompetent.
Yes, and later he was exonerated, of course, after his death. Poor guy.
So he, quote unquote, committed suicide.
Yes, but
at the hands of police, most likely, after being beaten. Because they probably wanted to, have a suspect in custody and be able to tell everyone we solved it.
Right.
And then tell people, well, he killed himself because of the guilt.
Guilt. Mm-hmm.
Which is a terrible way to go.
Right.
But hey, if you're going to burn down the homeless camp to stop the crimes, you might as well murder a guy and say we solved it.
So, yeah. So that was he actually, and the last one that I'll bring up, were the most viable suspects.
Mm-hmm. So
although,
if not Dolezal.
Which he was exonerated, as I said.
Yeah.
So we'll get to the one they think was the one. But another man they were looking at was Willie Johnson. And he was ID'd by a witness while he was disposing of a body. He had connections with both of the known victims. So that was interesting because they only ID'd 2, and this guy knew both.
Yeah. That's the only connection between any of the victims.
Yeah. So he was never actually tried as the torso murderer, but he was tried for a different death. The body that he was seen disposing of.
Right, someone totally unrelated.
Yes, and he was sent to the electric chair in 1944. Mm-hmm. And then the final suspect that they believe
was... My money's on this one.
Yes, was Dr. Francis Sweeney.
The Sween.
He was the most viable of the 3, and in World War I, he performed amputations on soldiers. That was his job in the war. Mm-hmm. Like he was a doctor, and he was in charge of conducting the amputations.
So he would dismember people with surgical precision?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Later,
would he have knowledge of anesthetics?
Yes, he would. God. Later, he became an alcoholic, a severe one, and he had anxiety and depression due to all the trauma he saw in the war.
Could he have been deranged by his terrible PTSD from the war?
I think so. And on top of that, he was gassed in the war, which caused nerve damage. And that's all I found on that, which I was thinking it might have caused more than just some nerve damage.
Yeah, nerve damage or affected his psyche.
Right. So that was something else that he had encountered.
Although, playing devil's advocate or devil's defense attorney, my client had terrible nerve damage from being gassed in the war. How could he precisely surgically behead 12 people?
No, he could, especially if he was on the booze. That could override Well, it could override. I'm saying, like,
It could steady his nerves.
Yeah.
A little bit of the demon drink.
It could override his nerve damage. Just saying.
And this was Prohibition era, so he was drinking moonshine that affected his vision like everyone else. So he couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But I think he did.
I think he did. So Elliot Ness interviewed him, and before he was interviewed, he was held in a hotel room for 3 days to sober up because he was so drunk. The police didn't even want to interview him, so they held him for 3 days in a hotel room to dry him out.
In a hotel room?
Yeah.
Well, that's nice of him.
Well,
he's an esteemed doctor.
Right. So, after he was interviewed, I never found much about the interview itself, but I did find that he failed 2 polygraphs. And after that, he later started sending threatening postcards to Elliot Ness. Mm-hmm. And again, never...
Well, everybody was doing that.
Well, but, his name was on them and everything. All the evidence, though, against him, unfortunately, was circumstantial, so they couldn't charge him with anything. But we do know that about his background, that he was a surgical doctor in World War I. He knew about drugs, probably debilitating drugs because of what he did.
And
he
how
had
to preserve a body. Some of the corpses were believed to be refrigerated for some time before being dismembered and done.
Which he would have that knowledge.
Yeah.
He also had his anxiety and depression and was an alcoholic, and he was gassed, so he wasn't in his right mind. And he did practice he was still a doctor, and he did practice in a morgue in that area, which would really make it easy for him to kill and dispose.
He would have access to the tools.
And he'd have access to everything in a private area.
A private surgery in which to conduct his...
And then there was a patient that came forward later and said that some doctor, he didn't name him, but some doctor who was a man attempted to drug him. And it didn't say what the patient was there for, but apparently drugging him was unnecessary. So he noted that, and I think he, left and didn't...
let me get my checkbook.
Didn't allow anything to happen, but that was another just piece of evidence kind of angling toward him, Sweeney. But again, it's all circumstantial. You can't say for sure that any of that's definitive.
Well, and if he's got medical knowledge, and there's all these people down on their luck.
Right.
Word on the street could have been, go
see to that guy. He'll do it for free.
Go see that guy. He'll, if your appendix are hurting, go see him. He might be able to help you. And then nobody sees that guy again. Right.
And that could very well have been. It could have been as simple as he didn't have to do much luring.
Looking for help. Yeah. Him just saying, I'm a doctor. I can tell what's ailing you.
Right.
Just come down to my office at the morgue.
But unfortunately, he died before anything could be looked into further. And so that's why, as of now, there is no actual suspect.
The first unsolved case on Crossing the Tape.
Yes. An interesting one, though.
Mm-hmm. And he was, you say he died before anything was actually definitively proven.
Right.
Was he beaten and found hanging in a jail cell?
I don't believe so.
No, he received the luxury treatment of dying peacefully on his own.
Right.
The preferred plan.
Right. So, that's all I have with that one.
Now, you speculated a bit as far as why castrations and decapitations and dismemberment. With all that, you think that the doctor is the most likely culprit?
Yeah, because I think his anxiety played a part in that. Just because he was anxious and depressed, and who knows, maybe we don't really know much about him prior to World War I. So what if he had a fantastic practice and was well renowned, and then the war happened and messed him up?
To the war, and then the depression hit.
And it could have been just his way of having power again.
Yeah,
I mean,
life
that's
is in shambles.
Speculative, but it's a possibility.
Thing that he can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the role of PTSD for a wartime surgeon or a doctor whose main focus is amputation. Once all that's gone, and it's like, I'll just go home and live your normal life now. And especially after being gassed and everything, and
he probably couldn't.
Alcoholism. Yeah, how do you go back to normal after that?
He probably couldn't, and that's another big reason he probably did it.
Mm-hmm. And he had this weird need, or he only could receive
gratification.
Yeah, satisfaction through doing what he does best.
Yeah. Could very well be. To me, he certainly was the most viable suspect, which is what authorities thought as well.
Yeah. I think in preventing further tragedies, we should take the Eliot Ness method of, burn down all the homeless camps, then he can't kill any homeless. I think the best way to prevent something like this, no more doctors.
No, I don't think so.
I think that's the key.
I don't think so. We can't be overly facetious about things like that.
Medical colleges.
No.
Well, I guess this one will never be solved.
No. And I think the answer is just investigation.
Hopefully.
You have to be lawful, even though not all of this was. But
yeah.
I don't think a lot of that would fly today.
The 30s were a different time.
Right.
And that's all we've got for you today on Crossing the Tape.
Mm-hmm.
Please sign out of the crime scene.
Make sure you put the time.
Please put the time. Military.
Yes.
No AM, PM.
No, we don't run on that. We run on military.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again soon, perhaps for another mini episode that I'm sure everyone loved so much.
I hope so.
Signing off, I'm Brendan.
I'm Hillary.
So long.